We begin this morning with the deaths of 3 U.S. service members in northeast Jordan. It happened yesterday at a logistics support base for the U.S. military near Jordan's border with Syria. A drone packed with explosives struck near a shelter where American troops were sleeping, killing 3 and injuring more than 30. President Biden released a statement shortly after, reading in part, quote, "While we are still gathering the facts of this attack, we know it was carried out by radical Iran-backed militant groups operating in Syria and Iraq. We will hold all those responsible to account at a time and in a manner of our choosing."
Let's bring in right now U.S. With us, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, retired 4-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis. He's Chief International Analyst for NBC News. Admiral, thank you so much for being with us last week. I brought up a very simple metaphor about a guy who sends people from that house across the street coming over and constantly stealing things from your house or breaking windows in your house. And we said, well, what do? You go take out the house across the street. Tell them you're going to call the cops or something. In this case, I wonder how much longer is the United States going to allow its troops to be shot at by people who are being funded by Iran? At what point do we not just go to the source of the problem, which has been the source of the problem since 1979, and go to Iran? If Iran wants to continue killing Americans or trying to kill Americans, should we not at least sink one of their ships? Should we not at least blow up their Air Force? Should we not at least blow up their oil fields? Pick one of the 3. I don't care.
When this occurred, after the blow to my heart of learning that we lost 3 of our best and 25 to 30 wounded, 10 evacuated, meaning they're at risk of life-threatening wounds. This is attack number 160 or so. So, Joe, I am one who is always, let's try the diplomacy. Let's try the incremental steps here. I think we are at the point where what is necessary is a hammer blow against the proxies. I'll expand on that in one moment. If that doesn't have the intended effect, then yes, it's time to go after Iran. So I think what the Pentagon is doing, I know what the Pentagon is doing, is building options for the president that will include increasing the intelligence collection, using cyber to go after both the proxies, probably Iran, CIA stepping up its game inside Iran. Iran's using their proxies. Maybe we could use a few proxies operating against the mullahs, against the Revolutionary Guard, and the military strike packages speak for themselves. I think you'll see the president order another aircraft carrier, 80 combat aircraft, back to the region to prepare in case we have to go after Iran directly. And by the way, if I were going to pick something, I would go after the ship at sea scenario. We've done that before. It's a very effective way and a very direct demonstration of American power.
Well, they're certainly going after our ship. So what is the logic of the Iranians? I mean, do they really want to fight a war with the United States? Do they really want to go up against our military might? That will be over in a couple of weeks. What is the logic?
Their logic is threefold. One is to demonstrate globally, demonstrate to their partners. They're very close with the Iranians. They want to impress the Chinese. They want to show that they can maneuver through this vast land battle space of the Middle East, the old Persian Empire. Number 2, they want to take advantage of the fact that Israel is completely occupied with what's happening in Gaza. Normally, Israel can be part of these kind of responses. They are very tied down. That looks to Iran like an opportunity. And number 3, all politics are local. The Iranians are trying to distract their internal population from growing resistance within the country of Iran, much of it led, by the way, by women and girls. This becomes something going outside to slay monsters like the United States that the mullahs feel can distract that internal population. But bottom line, Joe, no, they don't want an all-out fight with the United States. I don't think it'll end up there. Next step, we're going to have a campaign of days, if not weeks, to really denude these proxies. We need in our back pocket the strike plan for Iran.
Okay, let's bring in NBC News national security and military correspondent Courtney Kuby. Courtney, what are you hearing from military leaders?
So this was a one-way attack drone. It landed at a place called Tower 22, which a lot of our viewers have probably never heard of. And frankly, a lot of people in the military just don't talk about. It's a small outpost in northeastern Jordan. It's just on the other side of Syria. And it functions as a base where they train and advise the Jordanian military, but it's also really a logistical hub or support facility for the U.S. military garrison that's just on the other side in Syria called Al-Tanf. There's a small number of U.S. troops there. It's about 350, mainly soldiers and airmen, who are performing this function. So this one-way attack drone, it got through the air defenses of this base and was able to land and explode right near a shelter where troops were sleeping. That's why we saw such a high casualty number here. 3 killed, U.S. soldiers killed, and now we're up to about 36 injured. And Mika, that's everything from minor cuts and bruises. There are a number of traumatic brain injuries. We expect that number could rise. But there were also a number of U.S. service members who were injured badly enough in this attack that they had to be medevaced out. So we expect to hear more today. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin returns to the Pentagon today after being gone for his emergency hospitalization with the complications surrounding his prostate cancer surgery. He's supposed to be back in the building today, and we do expect to hear from him, where we hope that we will hear a little bit more about this today. But this is the first time, as we've been saying, that U.S. troops have been killed by one of these Iranian proxy groups since this uptick in attacks back in mid-October by these groups. We've seen more than 160 attacks against bases in Iraq and Syria, many of them drones like the one that we saw at Tower 22, but there have also been pretty advanced ballistic missiles. There have been rockets, mortars that have been launched. This is not the first time we've had Americans wounded in these attacks. We have had dozens, frankly, who've been wounded, mainly traumatic brain injuries, but this is the first time that any have been killed. So we're expecting to hear more from the Pentagon about it today, but a pretty tragic event. And the real question now is, does this have a real impact on the potential escalation for what's already an extremely tense situation in the Middle East, Mika?
That is the question. NBC News national security and military correspondent Courtney Kuby, thank you very much for your reporting this morning.
So, Jonathan Lemire, this seems pretty simple to most Americans. If the Iranians are funding one group after another, they keep injuring or killing U.S. servicemen and women, most Americans would say, you know, you can keep shooting at the 3 or 4 different groups that the Iranians are funding, or you can go straight to the source. Is the White House considering going straight to the source?
So this is the day the White House has dreaded since October 7th and since the escalation of violence in the Middle East. They don't want a widening war. They didn't want to be brought to this moment.
Well, they have one.
It has arrived.
One because, you know, the thing is, the Iranians keep killing Americans. The Iranians keep wounding Americans. The Iranians keep trying to get other people to kill Americans. The war has arrived. The regional war is here. And if we don't take it to Iran, Americans are going to keep getting killed. But,
so
but let me ask you, does the White House understand that?
Yeah, let me bring you in White House thinking right now that to this point, up until yesterday, the White House has been very selective, deliberate in how they responded. Largely attacks that were not successful, that Americans, military was able to intercept and knock down, the White House kind of ignored. And only those, the Houthis attacks that led to a result, an attack on a ship, let's say, that was successful, they responded to. We have seen a number of strikes in recent weeks from the U.S., sometimes with our help from our UK partners, in response to these Iranian backed splinter groups. But this is different now. American troops are dead. And I'm told White House advisors in a secure video conference with President Biden, who spent the weekend in South Carolina campaigning, they're mulling over their options. No decision yet made, but one of the options is striking within Iran itself. Unclear what the target would be. These are things that will be worked out in the days ahead, as President Biden himself said, in the manner and time of their choosing. And that's been the Biden approach throughout his presidency, is that they make the choice. They're not going to be rushed into it. They're going to consider what to do. But there's no doubt, Joe, no doubt, a line was crossed yesterday. These are American troops who were killed, and therefore it's going to require a different sort of response. So, Caddy, let's talk about what they could do and what the ramifications might be, because they could, yes, hit these militant groups even harder to try to permanently cripple them as best they can. They could go within Iran itself, but that latter choice, which a lot of Republicans are really pushing for this administration to do, could further inflame the situation, widen the war, that just more. What's the latest that you're hearing?
So the reason that we've got those two aircraft carriers there in the Mediterranean is to try to prevent the widening of this war. And when it comes to Hezbollah, there seems to have been a certain amount of success. It does seem to have acted as a deterrent. Then you've had the Americans striking down in Yemen against the Houthis. And so far, whilst the Houthis have carried on wielding their attacks, they haven't been as deadly as this one. Now you have this drone attack. And as you say, the implication is that there has to be some kind of different level of response. But you calibrate that against striking inside Iran and what that would lead to. So what are the ramifications of that? And Admiral, let me bring you in here. You're the military man. If we were to take that option out of your back pocket and the White House were to put it on the table, obviously, whenever you strike inside a country that has an advanced weapon system of its own, and we've seen the precision, I think, with some surprise, of Iranian missile attacks against Pakistan recently, perhaps surprising some of observers who didn't realize quite how precise some of the Iranian weapon systems were and effective the Iranian weapon systems were. What are the implications for the White House? What are they weighing here? Because it's a big move to go and strike inside Iran. What are the possible ramifications of that?
It is. They'll start by not striking inside Iran on land, but I believe firmly they'll go after maritime assets. That's extremely proportional to the Houthi attacks. That's why ships at sea become pretty attractive targets. Next level, closer to Iran, Caddy, would be oil and gas platforms, which the Iranians use as intelligence gathering sites. These are all over the Arabian Gulf, all over the coast of the North Arabian Sea. Those are pretty attractive targets as well. Number three, you'd probably go after coastal targets. Again, keeping with that maritime theme, take out dockyards, fuel stocks, command and control networks. All of this accompanied by cyber, which you would go inside Iran, but with cyber. Your last resort, but highly controversial and potentially really dragging you into war, would be to do cruise missile strikes. I really don't think you want manned aircraft over Iran. You don't need to. Cruise missile strikes to go after, for example, armaments, where the Iranians are building drone systems, where they are building all of the ballistic missiles they're supplying to these individuals. To take Joe's analogy one more time, if that difficult neighbor shows up with a baseball bat or a gun, you go after the factory where the gun is made, where the baseball bat is made. I think that's your inside Iran target. You could put together the whole package. We certainly have the capability to do that. I think that detailed plan is in development, and I can assure you there are already rough drafts of it flying around.